Welcome back to IGN Live. My name is Jose Otero, and you are joining us for Nintendo Voice Chat. I'm joined by Brian Altano,
Hey.
Per Schneider,
Hey.
who knows Cologne very well here where Gamescom actually takes place.
Yeah, it's my hometown. I was born here, so it's like a little bit of a homecoming for me.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Willkommen.
Willkommen.
Yeah, and I'm constantly amazed at your guys' ability to eat various foods that we may only eat once a year, but you guys are doing
That's
like
what
every 5
tourism
minutes.
is all about.
Yeah, like giant pork knuckles and stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty
it's a lot.
terrifying. Yeah.
Those are Bavarian.
So we are going to start on a little bit of a downer because we have to start with talking about Metroid Prime Federation Force, which the review is up on IGN. It is a 5.9, mediocre on our scale. And we should talk about our experience with it because it is a bit of, there are some cool ideas, but there's also some frustration.
Yeah, I kept going back and forth on that game. I mean, you start playing it, and my first impression was, it's not the right game for a handheld, you know. And I felt about the same about the first Metroid Prime that we got on a handheld before as well. It was kind of like a scaled down experience. It didn't feel as good. Obviously, it doesn't look as good. And there's some weird missteps with Federation Force too, where you're supposed to be in these hulking mechs, and it just doesn't make it feel like it. It's like you can't tell that you're not just a regular character.
Especially from the size of the doors and the size of every platform that you find, where realistically, if the proportions are that scale, like it doesn't match up.
And it's weird. Like you could just have the soldiers and it wouldn't make a difference. But like ignoring that, it's a fun game when you're playing it with friends. And I would say playing it with friends in the same room.
Yep.
So like you want to be able to hear each other and
talk,
cheer and talk, and then it becomes a really fun experience. But the single player, it does feel a little dull. You don't get this kind of exciting gunplay until you get to a boss usually.
Well, and that was my key sort of issue with the game is, in fact, the gunplay and how unbalanced it feels on the single-player side, where every mission feels like, first of all, I love the mission variety. I think they nailed that. Like, I never felt like I was doing the same thing for very long. There were different like search and rescue missions. Some were about defense. Some were about specific targets or like eliminating specific threats. And I thought that was really cool. But you get into the second half or the last third of the game, and at that point, the enemy health bars are so long. And even with the Lone Wolf mod, which is a modification to your suit that basically doubles your damage output, but halves your damage input.
For single player only,
it would still take forever to take one of them down. And you're allowed to bring these drones with you that the game doesn't really explain very well how they work. Yeah. But the drones will be your stand-ins for if you don't have a second, third, or fourth player. But the drawback is that those drones, they auto-fire, they just kind of follow you around. But they also just like steal kills. Like I'm lining up a shot for this one guy, and also you see a shot come over and it takes something out, and I'm just like, well, what am I doing here?
I mean, it's an interesting game because I don't think it's a strong Metroid game, and I think we got those expectations out of the way when we first heard about it, right? But even given that, removing the Metroid license, which it almost entirely has, aside from a few little things, I don't think it's a very compelling first-person shooter, and I don't think it's a very compelling handheld game. Like as a handheld game, I think the short mission structure kind of works in its favor because you can sit down and kind of beat a level in 8 or 9 minutes, which is good. But I think that the fact that it works best with multiple players around, and that's not something you can always ask for when you're playing on a 3DS, whereas on a console, like you're always connected online. On a 3DS, it's hard to expect a bunch of people getting together and playing this game. And it kind of bums me out because I was really kind of a champion for it, and I didn't like the negativity this game got before anyone even played it.
Yeah, same.
And now that I've actually played it, and I'm a guy that like really likes first-person shooters on handhelds, which is weird because there haven't been a ton of them. But I like games like Killzone on Vita. I liked Metroid Prime Hunters. I actually found some enjoyment from even the Call of Duty games they used to put on the DS, but this one just doesn't feel right.
But Brian, I would say that like I think the people they're targeting for this kind of game are the folks that play like Monster Hunter Generations together or Monster Hunter 4. There are groups of people who do get together to play this style of game, and I will say in its defense that it does, even though the art style is a very take it or leave it thing, and the chibi big-headed like soldiers absolutely a turnoff to me at least, they do get the feel of Metroid Prime's worlds right. And when you turn up 3D, it amazes me that you get that feeling like you're behind that visor, you're peeking into that world.
Right.
Even if it is a lower resolution than what you'd expect it to be.
The visor looks awesome. Like and the game has some style to it too, right? Like Metroid, a lot of the smaller enemies in Metroid aren't exactly the most memorable creatures either, right? But there's enough there to make you feel like you are in the Metroid world, and it sounds like Metroid. The music's not as good as most of the other games, right? But what it does get right is that collaborative spirit, effort, right? Like when you're pushing spheres around, or you have a point in a mission where you split up, and like 4 players have to do all these, or can do all these different things at the same time and work together. It feels really good. And so if you are the kind of person, I feel like, who has 3 friends who are living nearby and are willing to all buy their own copy of the game, right? Because it's not a download play title. I think you'll have some fun with it. Like I like it. I like it for that, and I can recommend it to people to play it.
Well, so I think like if you look at a game like Triforce Heroes, which came out recently, which is the same sort of situation, I think a game like that works better, not only because it just worked better on its own, but also because that game came out in the life cycle of a bunch of other Zelda properties that we got to play and enjoy. I mean, this was after Link Between Worlds. This is before the new Zelda game, which is actually we've all played by now. It's coming out next year. We even got like Hyrule Warriors, a bunch of other things. This Metroid game has the word Metroid in it, but there aren't other Metroid games in the universe right now for us to be like, well, this is a nice little appetizer for the main course.
Well, there was, and it was a fan-made project that got killed, but I hear you. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, if you
but I wouldn't fault it for that, right? Like you got to basically say, I'm going to take this game on its own, play it for what it is, and experience it, and still like it still comes up short.
Yeah,
if you ignore the fact that we are so hungry for a freaking Metroid game, right?
Yeah, and to Triforce Heroes' credit, again, doing download play was a smart decision because it was a way, and you've said this on our show before, Per, but it was a way to upsell that game to other people. You'd be like, hey, come play a mission with me, and then you'd have that experience. And after that experience, you'd still be able to hang on to like certain rupees or certain materials you got, make a costume or a thing out of it. Whereas I felt like my other big problem with Federation Force is that the cooler sub-weapons, like the missiles, super missiles, there's a flame shot, a charge shot, you don't get to use them very often. And the reason being is because if you fire it, you lose it, and you may not get a replenishment. Like the only way you get item replenishments or ammo drops in this game is if you find crates just lying around, like boxes lying around. Enemies don't drop anything. And to me, that kind of is backwards logic to the way Metroid worked, but it works better in a co-op setting because we've distributed everything among the 4 of us. So from a single player perspective, it really let me down. From a co-op perspective, it works a lot better, I feel. But it wasn't enough in the end, which was pretty sad to me.
It is competently made. You know, like when you play it, you'll see lots of good stuff. You know, from the engine to some of the ideas like the mod system, there's a lot of good stuff. They thought through how players can share things and how points are distributed. So I like a lot about that game. It's just like in the end, it doesn't generate this high level of excitement I'd have playing a Zelda game or a real Metroid game, right?
Yeah, no, I think, I think that's fair.
I kept looking for that, you know? I kept playing and playing and being like, maybe this one, maybe this one, maybe this mission. And it just never really happened for me.
Sure, I think that's fair. Well, then let's talk about Nintendo's presence at Gamescom, which we knew coming out of E3, this was going to be a quieter year for Nintendo. They pretty much, you know, took the fifth on what's going on in the future of you know, the company, you know, being that Wii U is where it is, being that 3DS is getting long in the tooth, and being that the next thing, NX, they're still not ready to talk about. But that said, you know, they've got a booth here at the show. Let's describe that for folks. Like, did you guys go out to the show floor?
Yeah. I mean, the booth is exactly what I thought it wouldn't be. You know, when I saw the setup at E3, I said, all right, they spent all this money creating this beautiful Zelda Wunderland, which they could have brought to Gamescom, right?
And Comic-Con.
And that's exactly what they didn't do. They created a really cool little retro corner, right, like with old TVs and NESs and stuff, and it looks really cute. They have, you know, playable kiosks for many of their games that are out, a line of games that are newer, like Mario Party, obviously for 3DS, Monster Hunter, and then there's a black box for Zelda, and it's appointment only or invite only or winner only,
or
right?
if you won and did a certain contest.
And it's tiny with a tiny sign. Instead of screaming from the rooftops that the Wii U has this big freaking game coming, it's hidden.
And I think that's part of the fallout of at E3. They came out big with that game. I mean, bigger than I think they've ever come out with any game, right? Because it was the only game they had. But I think maybe the thinking is that Gamescom, if we do that again,
it would be awesome.
It loses some impact. It's good for Europe, but it loses some impact because you're basically showing the same things, right?
But fans haven't played it.
I mean, if they had a problem with showing the same things, they wouldn't have Splatoon and Donkey Kong Country on the floor. I mean,
but this is a new thing. I mean, and also it's still unclear to us if March is realistically when NX is coming out. Let's say, for example, that slips, and you came to Gamescom or you came to the next trade show showing this game off. I think you do run into the inevitable fatigue of, I've seen everything I need to see so far. Show me something else. And they don't have something else to show.
Well, we have, but I think if you're a Nintendo fan living in Europe and Gamescom's the biggest show of all the conferences of the entire year, you come to the Nintendo booth and you're like, where's Zelda?
Yeah, but you saw all that footage at E3.
Well, that's not the same.
It's not the same as playing. No, but this wasn't your average everyday demo either, and this is a public trade show where a 30-minute demo may not go as well.
It would be, you know, knowing
That's
the
a
masses
challenge.
of people, like how many people walk around at Gamescom, it is difficult to do a challenge, a demo like that.
Sure.
You know, because you have to get into the world a little bit more and experience it. But, you know, so what? Then there would have been long lines for this demo. They could have built a big booth with lots of demo stations. They had the demo. E3
it's
demo
fair.
is a
The
timed
E3 demo is here.
They could have reused all of that here.
Okay.
It is a confounding move to me
Yeah.
to not focus on that title at the biggest gaming expo in the entire world.
Yeah.
Right?
In
This
Europe,
was
yeah.
your way to get in front
I
of the European
got to
gamers.
move on because we've got just a few, at least two more things to cover. So you're right, they did have at their booth, so Dragon Quest VII, Mario Party Star Rush, they had a section for Pokemon,
Yep.
Smash, Splatoon, the usual suspects. Mario Kart 8 was there, which is at this point like 2-year-old game. Some of their indie titles were there, so Severed was there. Fast Racing Neo was there, which if
Pretty
you've
cool.
seen, we've got direct feed up of it on the site. Wow, like holy cow. So this is the DLC pack. It's called the Neo Future Pack. It is coming out September 30th. We got a chance to play it. It is absolutely off the rails, just crazy. Like you'll see if you're watching the footage now, like he's just gonna take a jump that I could not believe they put in here. So he'll come off this ramp in a second and almost collide with a train, which
Yeah.
I'm just like, first of all, what is that doing there? So
This
here,
is such a gorgeous looking game too. I'm like,
I mean, like,
a
look at that, look at
downloadable
that.
indie
It just,
game.
by all means, just pretend this says F-Zero. Just pretend.
Yeah.
Like play the F-Zero music underneath it. Pretend that that Captain Falcon's in there. Just pretend, because this is basically the best F-Zero game that's been made in a couple of
And
years.
looking at the DLC, I mean, it looks even more like F-Zero.
Yeah.
You now get the pipes level,
Yep, the
right? You
snake
saw
levels.
that. It,
Yeah.
it really, I mean, it feels like a return to playing classic kind of F-Zero, or more, you
Yeah.
know, closely F-Zero GX, like the Amusement Vision developed title looks a lot like
Yeah,
this. So
definitely.
it doesn't have that same kind of feeling of racing in a pack.
Yeah.
Like the F-Zero games do, but like speed and kind of like the energy management are very similar.
Yeah, this is cool. I mean, I grew up playing games like this, especially if you look at stuff like Extreme G and, you know, like,
Oh, man.
yeah, if we go deep in the cut. But it's cool to see stuff like this still being made. Bring it back. I'm actually really surprised that Nintendo didn't just go, hey, can we call that an F-Zero game?
Please. Yeah, so this is 8 new tracks in the DLC, 10 new vehicles, 18 new audio tracks. There is a retail version in Europe, apparently.
cool.
So Nintendo of Europe has a publishing label called Nintendo eShop Selects. And coming to that, so this thing's going to get sold for 24 euros. It's the full collection. It's the original game plus DLC.
Ooh, that did not go well for
Yeah,
me.
that did not go well. But then on top of that, SteamWorld Collection is also happening in Europe only.
Yeah.
And that's SteamWorld Dig and SteamWorld Heist, which were both fantastic
Both
games.
of those games are really cool. You mentioned Severed before, which I played on Vita. Awesome game. Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely cool. I didn't like it as much as Guacamelee, which you can also play on your Wii U, but it's a really cool game.
Yeah, and this may be, you know, pointing towards the audience being more, you know, family-oriented, younger people who don't venture into the eShop that much to download titles, right? Like when they see this at a local store in Europe, they may be tempted to pick up these games, and
Yeah.
that's a great collection, man.
Well,
really,
and
really
a
good
budget
games in
price
it.
too. I think that is also really smart.
It's like a humble
interesting.
bundle in disc form,
It's
basically.
retail form, yeah. It's interesting though that at least in North America, that's not a thing currently. Which I don't know. What I learned during this trip is that each region kind of runs their territory the way they see fit.
Sure.
So America's going to make certain decisions, Europe's going to make certain decisions, and we've seen that before, right?
Yeah.
We've seen like
Yeah.
there's certain either bundles or certain console editions, 3DS editions that are Europe only, and then America goes, wow.
Yeah, I think it was
too.
cool. I mean, we were just walking around like European game shops the other day. We were in Germany just checking out what the video game sections look like. And then, like you see the Nintendo one, you see the 3DS one, and you see the PS4 one, and you just see how that lay of the land is different than what we're used to in America. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff.
Absolutely. And the last thing I guess we should touch on really quick is the one cool thing that they did pull out was Pokemon Sun and Moon's Battle Royale mode,
Yep.
which was a very quick sort of, here's what this was like. We sort of showed this at E3. It was an opportunity for Nintendo Germany to just put that out in front of a bunch of
Yeah.
fans. And I think it was really smart, just to get them excited.
Yeah, leaning into Pokemon stuff right now is the smartest thing they can do.
Yep.
And is it packed? I mean, you walk around Cologne, you see lots of people playing Pokemon Go, right?
Yeah.
Pokemon Go fever has arrived later in Europe because the game came out later. And like the other day, they had to shut down in Düsseldorf. They had to shut down bridges because there were too many Pokemon Go fans fans walking.
Yeah.
Do you sense that kind of same level of excitement for the title here?
So far, I think so.
Yeah.
But I mean, Pokemon's such a mega franchise, right?
Yeah.
And I think it'll be interesting to see the Pokemon Go effect. Like, did it in fact hit Nintendo's, retail titles that currently exist, or is it going to affect Sun and Moon and how well that game sells?
Well, we saw the
I think
MPD
it's
in
possible.
America, right?
The 3DS sold well.
Yeah.
So it's funny though, because MPD numbers haven't really come out yet. They got postponed, but Nintendo's press release went out early and said that Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire and X and Y did really well.
Yeah,
everything went up.
They very specifically said, Pokemon fever is struck everywhere.
Yep.
And it's definitely raising all the ships in their tide for them.
It's contagious.
It is contagious.
Well, we've got to wrap, but we have more IGN Live for you. Thank you very much for watching, and stay with us for more.